Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, distinguished participants, colleagues, and friends. I am particularly excited to be here today, and I'm sure you all are. As such, on behalf of the African Evaluation Association, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the AfrEA Excellence in Evaluation Exchange Webinar Series 2026. This platform continues to serve as a vital space for knowledge sharing, critical reflection, and advancing evaluation practice across the continent. Today's session, titled Mapping the Landscape, an analysis of university-based evaluator education programs in Africa, speaks directly to a pressing and timely issue, particularly how we train, professionalize, and sustain the next generation of evaluators within African context. As evaluation gains increasing prominence in policy, development, and governance, it is essential that our training systems are both contextually grounded and globally relevant. This conversation invites us to reflect on the current state of evaluator education in Africa, identify gaps and opportunities, and collectively think through pathways for strengthening institutional capacity and advancing Made in Africa evaluation. We are delighted to have you all join us for what promises to be a rich and insightful discussion. To guide us through this important conversation, we are privileged to have a distinguished moderator whose experience and insight in the field of evaluation will greatly enrich today's discussion. Our moderator, in the person of Dr. Awuor Ponge, is a senior associate fellow in charge of research, policy, and evaluation at the African Policy Center, APC. He is the immediate former vice president of the African Evaluation Association, AfrEA. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy PhD degree in Gender and Development Studies from Kenyatta University. Dr. Ponge is an adjunct faculty at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, where he teaches development and policy studies. Dr. Ponge has been extensively involved in capacity building and project management and has had over 20 years of experience in academia as a lecturer and trainer in tertiary educational institutions in Kenya and in the practice of international development, both as a scholar and practitioner. He is an experienced researcher, evaluator, policy analyst, program manager, and facilitator. He has extensive international experience in program planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Dr. Ponge is an expert in evaluating national and global advocacy programs using innovative participatory evaluation methodologies and approaches, including outcome harvesting and most significant change, among others. He was awarded the International Organization for Collaboration in Evaluation IOCE and Eval Partners Award in 2015 for his contribution to evaluation in Africa and mentoring young and emerging evaluators. With a virtual and resounding round of applause, help me welcome our distinguished moderator, Dr. Awuor Ponge. Dr. Ponge, thank you very much for accepting to moderate this webinar, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Badu, for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are logging in from. So let me begin with a quick question. Where can an aspiring evaluator in Africa go to study evaluation? Maybe you can just write your answers on the chat box. We will get back to this as the presentation goes on. So that is the question we want to answer today. Dr. Gabriel Keney started with that question way back in 2017, and he found out that the answer wasn't easy to find. His pursuit of this question, where can I study monitoring and evaluation in Africa, became the heart of his PhD research. That journey speaks to a core challenge we often discuss at AfrEA. Building our continent's evaluation capacity depends on knowing where and how evaluators are trained. The African Evaluation Association, AfrEA, has always led efforts to strengthen evaluation on the continent. We've done this through conferences, workshops, peer-reviewed African Evaluation Journal, and we have had new initiatives like the African School of Evaluation and our monthly Evaluation Excellence Exchange webinar series, this one being one of them. And through this, AfrEA encourages knowledge sharing and capacity building. Our strategic plan and our strategic focus for 2026-2028 include issues like the Made in Africa Evaluation Agenda, the African Union's Agenda 2063, and the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDG. And this reminds us that African-led evidence and evaluation capacity are essential for sustainable development. Today's webinar is part of that effort, connecting research to practice across our member community. So our speaker today, Dr. Gabriel Keney, is an applied educational researcher and evaluator with deep experience in Africa and the United States. He holds a PhD in educational research methodology, specializing in program evaluation from the University of North Carolina, UNC, at Greensboro. Before his doctoral studies, Dr. Keney spent over a decade working in institutional research and program evaluation at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. He now serves as the Director of Institutional Effectiveness at St. Francis University in Pennsylvania. In short, Dr. Keney brings both on-the-ground African evaluation experience and rigorous research skills to our topic. Today, Dr. Keney will share findings from his doctoral dissertation, which is entitled Building the Evaluator's Africa Needs. Insight from a systematic mapping of evaluator education across the continent. In that study, Dr. Keney set out to chart the state of evaluator education programs in African universities. Using a systematic mapping approach, which was based on the Global Directory of Academic Programs in Evaluation, Dr. Keney reviewed program documents and websites and interviewed representatives from 14 African evaluation programs. In total, he examined 110 formal evaluator education programs across 18 countries. This is far more than previously listed in global directories. So this topic clearly matters to all of us in the African Evaluation Association community. AfrEA's vision to empower young and emerging evaluators and to deepen capacity building on the continent depends on understanding the training pipeline. Dr. Keney's work helps answer this question. Where are our future evaluators being trained? And how can we strengthen these programs? In short, his mapping of evaluator education is critical input for any strategy to build the evaluators Africa needs. I'll now hand over to Dr. Keney for his presentation. But before he begins, let me pose a few questions for us to keep in mind as Dr. Keney makes the presentation. So what surprised him most when mapping these programs? Which innovations or gaps stood out in different regions? And how can VOPES, that is the Voluntary Organization for Professional Evaluation, how can VOPES and universities use these insights, the insights from Dr. Keney's study, to improve evaluator training on the ground? We'll have a chance to explore these questions and many more in the Q&A section after the presentation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gabriel Keney as he speaks. You can post comments or questions in the chat, and after the talk, we'll open the floor to your questions. Dr. Keney, thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ponge. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. And my deepest gratitude to AfrEA for this opportunity to share the results of my dissertation with our community. Just a quick overview. We will look at what evaluator education is and what it is not, so that we clearly separate our discussion from other forms of evaluation capacity building. And we will also look at the question that informed this study, which Dr. Ponge touched on. And then what did I do and how did I go about conducting these studies? We'll look at the findings and what we need to do moving forward, which Dr. Ponge succinctly captured in his reflection questions. Right. So first, to the big question. The way evaluators are trained has direct implications for the quality of evaluation that is conducted. It also has implications for the cultural relevance and the credibility that the results have with our communities, and ultimately their influence on policy and practice. And various literature has captured these nuances. So speaking plainly, evaluation risk becoming technically sound but contextually disconnected when the training systems are not aligned with the realities on the ground. And this is significant for us, especially in Africa, because across the continent, we have seen a significant growth in the call for evaluation across government, across development partners, organizations. Even higher education institutions are now establishing monitoring and evaluation units to push and inform evaluation decisions and demonstrate accountability. And this rapid increase has been influenced by multiple factors, both local and external factors. And while various researchers have examined the state of evaluation in Africa, including the Made in Africa evaluation, very few studies have explored how evaluators are trained to meet the field's growing demand. And this question sits right at the heart of my study. And this study was motivated by my own experience back in 2016 when I wanted to pursue a master's degree in evaluation after working in research and evaluation for over 5 years. And I couldn't find one in Ghana. And the one that was in Ghana that I wanted to enroll in, I couldn't enroll because I did not have education background. So that pushed me to begin to search for opportunities outside the country. And so when I was developing my dissertation, I went back to that question, that where can I find monitoring and evaluation in Africa? This study is guided by simple but very important questions. The first one is, who is training Africa's evaluators? Where are these programs located? How are these programs structured? What do they teach? And to what extent are these programs reflecting realities? How are they integrating our indigenous methodologies, our indigenous paradigms, especially the Made in Africa evaluation? AfrEA has really done well in pushing this agenda, but how well is the conversation moving from the conference rooms and the workshop centers into the classroom where evaluators are trained to serve our continent? But before we go on to how I conducted this study, I want to narrow down on what evaluator education is. First, there are multiple conceptualizations of evaluator education. Some call it academic programs in evaluation. Some call it evaluation education. And one of the popular definitions that has been used in many literature is the fact that evaluator education includes a series of courses that have evaluation in the title with specific focus on evaluation. Now, this definition is problematic because a workshop that is happening, a 3-month workshop, a 2 weeks workshop that has courses on evaluation can qualify for this definition. And so I expanded this definition by situating the location of evaluator education. And so I say that one, it is a structured process, which means that you go through a series of steps. You have core courses, we have required courses that you need to take. We have internships, we have practicum that you need to take. And then it also has a purpose. Are we training for scholarship? Are we training for practice? And as we'll see later on, that the people we are training are being trained both for practice and scholarship. And where the divide happens depends on each individual's career orientation and aspirations. I also included that for this study, I defined the scope within accredited universities and institutions. And so it's possible that there are entities that are running evaluation programs but do not have the necessary accreditation so that they will not put our students in trouble when they present their certificates for job and other purposes. So the inclusion criteria for this study is the program has to be offered by an official academic institution. The programs include various levels: diploma, certificate, master's, bachelor's, and doctorate. The program also needs to have extensive focus on evaluation. So this means that the program needs to include at least 2 courses with the word evaluation in the title. And then also the duration is anything 3 months or longer. And this criteria has been used in previous studies by what was used to develop the Directory of Academic Programs in Evaluation, which is hosted by the Global Evaluation Initiative. Dr. John Lavelle has also used this criteria in his studies. So now, where did I get my data from? From 3 primary sources. The first one is documents. I reviewed documents that have been published. And so Trivani and Basheka was one of the major sources, published articles, and then the websites. So I would show you some example of how I went about conducting the data from obtaining the data from the websites. And then also interviews with program representatives. Now, this is important because when I reviewed the literature, what I found was that interview-based studies in evaluator education has happened previously. However, the people who were interviewed were either members of young and emerging evaluators, members of VOPAs, or government personnel. But very few have attempted to speak with the people who are at the heart of training evaluators in our educational institutions. So I focused specifically on the people who are running these programs in our universities. And these include faculty members, department chairs, or administrators. And I analyzed this study using descriptive statistics and decolonization lens. I will show you that in a bit. Now, this is what I did. So I started by looking at the programs that are offered at each country by going to Google as my primary source. I enter, say, give me the list of MA courses, MS courses, or diploma certificates in program evaluation in a particular country, as we can see here in Kenya. And then from the list of results that Google will give, I will then go into each program and extract the specific information. So some of the information that I extracted was description of the program, the objectives, and very important, the curriculum, what is taught. So from the African Nazarene, we see the curriculum structured into semesters, and that tells you what is being taught in that program. And that directly answers one of the questions that I posed in my study. On the right side, we also see the location of the program. And here we can see that it is located in the School of Business. So clearly you can tell the methodological orientation of the program, what their priorities will be. All right. Then the mode of study, it is purely online. The duration, 2 years. So when you plan to enroll in this program, it is clear when students are enrolled, when admission happens, how long you are going to spend in the program and expectations for completion. So I will extract this information and record them in an Excel spreadsheet so that I am able to do the descriptive analysis and tell the patterns that the data is showing me. Now, for the interview participants, the map here shows where the participants, I got them from. And I want you to look at this map very carefully because it has implication for where the programs are located across the continent. And then also, you look at the education background. That also I want you to pay a close attention to because when we go to the findings on where evaluation training is happening, you will see the same similar pattern because the people who are introducing these programs bring in their background, bring in their expertise into designing the evaluation programs. And so as we say, the apple does not fall very far from the tree is very true here. Now, key findings. The first one is who is training our African evaluators? Now, clearly public institutions dominate when it comes to evaluator education provision in Africa. And we have the private institutions also doing very well, contributing more than a quarter. The second finding is that evaluator education in Africa does not have a unified identity. It is claimed by multiple disciplines. And so one researcher described evaluator education as being a homeless discipline. Also, we have seen an expansion, a growth in the number of programs. But how is this happening? We'll look at that very well. And when we narrow down to what is being taught, we see variations in the quality, we see variations in the quantity, in the format, in the structure, and what is offered. And then Made in Africa evaluation, it is not absent. However, it is incomplete, it is uneven, and constrained. We will look at each of these findings soon. But first, this chart tells you the number of programs and studies that have compiled evaluator education in Africa. The first one was Professor Morton in South Africa, where he narrowed down on his country. And then Basheka and his colleague also analyzed 20. And 2023, this was when the Directory of Academic Programs in Evaluation was launched. And they identified 32 programs across Africa. Interestingly, this program did not include what I studied at Christian Service University, which was the first program in West Africa, first full evaluation program, master's program in West Africa. And so it prompted me to look deeper into what is out there. And that is how come I was able to identify 110 programs more. Now, going back to who is teaching and what is being taught, Remember the interview participants, the chart that I showed. You see here that a lot of the training is happening in education and the social sciences. Now, an important thing that I want you to take from here is the fact that evaluator education has not yet penetrated the STEM education field yet. As you can see, environmental science are great, and the health sciences have very low percentage of programs that have teaching evaluation. Now, the next thing I want you to see is the percentage of programs that I indicated here as not shared. These are the number of programs that did not provide any information about which department, which school is hosting a program. So you go to the website of these programs and there is no information at all about where the program is located, which department is offering this program. And this is important because the websites that we are using are not only there to communicate what the program is offering, but these are important marketing tools that we can use to improve the visibility of our programs. All right. Now, this map tells you the data from the Global Evaluation Initiative study that identified 32 programs. And the key finding from my study is that when you look at this map, it shows that a lot of the programs are concentrated in Southern Africa and East Africa by the size of the map. And you see West Africa and North Africa showing very scanty programs. And we see in the middle here that we have a whole opportunity that we can improve evaluator education over here. And also take note of the language and the geopolitical differences that we have. Now, the second map is what I found in my study. And my result also shows that a lot of the programs, about 50% of these programs, are concentrated in East Africa and Southern Africa. West Africa is coming up strongly, but we still have a significant opportunity to improve the Sahel region and then the southwestern part of Africa. This also follows the line of the geopolitical and colonial, the language lines. So the Portuguese speaking, I couldn't get any data on them. The Arabic North, I got Morocco and Egypt. And so we still have a significant opportunity to expand opportunities for introducing evaluation programs. Now, moving on. Now, the other result that is important to note is the clear mismatch between demand and supply. So, as we noticed earlier on, demand for evaluation expertise has increased. However, how evaluators are being trained has consistently been unevenly distributed. We see across various studies that master's programs dominate the field, but we have very limited pathways for training, for doctoral training. And so what does this tell us? It clearly tells us that we are training people for practice and not a lot to do with scholarship. So where do we go from here? The market demand is high. On the professional side, it is very high. But these programs have been positioned as serving the industry rather than serving the academic side of things. And so even though a lot of the programs are being run, we have people with master's degree, we have people with doctorates, but from different disciplines, some of whom have no training in evaluation, teaching in our programs. And I experienced that myself, and I can speak to that. Now, the other finding is that when we look at the curriculum, we are not consistently training evaluators for practice or scholarship. Most of the programs emphasize foundational training, advanced methodological and applied skills. However, there are very limited structured pathways for practical training, which we'll see very soon. And most programs differ in the content that they offer, the methodological focus, competency development. A lot of the programs do not have any competency, and that is clearly understood because we do not yet have our own competency framework. And also important is the fact that there are variations in the credit requirements. So most programs follow the American credit system or the European credit transfer and accumulation system. And the European credit system is most common in Northern Africa and then the Francophone countries. Whereas when you move to the Anglophone side, such as Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, or South Africa, we see more of the American credit system being used there. What does this mean? We do not have a standardized curriculum. We do not have a standardized entry point and requirement for completing these programs. And so somebody who is trained in a Francophone country, their practice and orientation might be very different from somebody trained in an English-speaking country. And we need to be speaking one language. Now, when it comes to practical training, here is what one participant said. You said that most trainers, most students, they know the training. However, there are very limited opportunities for internship. And so you get a theory, but you do not have the practical experience. And it was saying during my own studies, the practical side was absent. And so this presents a need for us to include more opportunities, expand more opportunities for students to have a good balance of both the practical side and the theoretical side. Now, this is what I consider the most important finding from my study. So, decolonization is not absent. The Made in Africa evaluation is not absent. However, what is currently there is inadequate to move the needle when we want to make evaluation our own on the continent. There is a strong recognition of the need to integrate African perspectives into evaluator education. And the interview participants highlighted the need for indigenous knowledge systems, cultural relevance, community-centered approaches which are used. And so even though these studies, these programs did not explicitly mention Made in Africa evaluation, we see glimpses of indigenous knowledge systems, we see cultural relevance, we see community-centered approaches that are being used in their training. And so though decolonization is discussed, there is a clear gap between aspirations and implementation. And the participants highlighted various factors that account for this, which we will look at very soon. And as a result of this, the integration of African perspectives tend to be incremental, fragmented, and superficial. When I review the curriculums of the programs, only 14 out of the 110 included topics on Made in Africa evaluation or something close to indigenous knowledge systems or community-centered approaches. And so to make sense of this integration, I used Professor Chelisa and her colleagues' continuum of indigenization. And here they talk about 4 levels in a progressive manner where we move from least indigenized, where Western methods and theories dominate what is taught and how evaluation is practiced, to a fully indigenized system. And so the figure that we see here illustrates the continuum of approaches ranging from least to most indigenized. And on the left hand, we see a symbolic inclusion, and I'll show you some quotations to support this, where African concepts are mentioned, but not integrated. In the middle spread, we see cohabitation or hybridization, where African concepts and Western approaches coexist. And that was one of the major findings from my study, where that is how most programs are negotiating decolonization in their programs. So they are not fully rejecting the Western models, but they are taking them and adapting them to our local context, adding what we have like storytelling and proverbs in their curriculum in addition to community participation. And then at the far end is where we want to see the transformation that we want to see, where evaluation and the curriculum is fully indigenized. Now, what the data is showing us, which will come on, I'll skip that, and then we'll look at the structural challenge. So now, the challenge from the programs is not a lack of intent to decolonize. What we lack instead is the enabling system to operationalize decolonization. And these limitations shape the broader structural factors that influence what is taught and how they are taught. And these include the dependence on Western materials because we do not simply have them. And even those that we have not yet entered into the classroom. The faculty members rarely uses them. And then the influence of donors, our donor partners, and the institutional structures. We will see some quotes that highlight the reality on the ground. And then confusion around what Made in Africa evaluation actually is. During my study, I found out that some faculty members have not yet heard or known what Made in Africa evaluation is. And so these factors possibly shape how curriculums are designed. So now let's look at one of the quotes. It says here that the programs are oriented towards the donor agencies because that is what the donor is requiring. And so the curriculum is designed to train students to meet the needs of the donors. And there is results. Dr. Mapidza in Wits conducted a study where they analyzed more than 300 evaluation reports. And in that report, they found that more than 60% of evaluation conducted in Africa were commissioned and conducted by external agencies. And they use rigorous Western-facing methodologies. So what does this tell us? We have a lot of work to do if we want to change the narrative. The second one is where we see a negotiation between indigenous and the Western approaches. So for these participants, they recognize that we cannot simply change the status quo. What we can do, rather, is to indigenize, is to take what is there, the Western tools, what we currently have, and make them fit for purpose for our use. Third one, this is where we see the storytelling, the proverbs coming into play, and then realizing that what the Western tools are not very different from what we have. So we can take what we have and use them in our own classroom. For this to happen, we need the government, we need all hands on deck to make this a reality. Now, here is a big one. It says that we may not mention them, and here it's referring to the Made in Africa evaluation, because we do not simply have the materials on Made in Africa evaluation. And so they default to the traditional methodologies and incorporate participatory methods in their teaching. And then also the confusion around Made in Africa evaluation and African evaluation principles. And so we need to move the conversation from the conference rooms to the published materials, which I know are there, to the classroom. We need to engage with the people who are teaching these programs. And so the challenge facing evaluator education in Africa is not the absence to decolonize, but the absence of the enabling systems to operationalize this important initiative. So now, what the data is telling us is that most of the evaluation programs in Africa operate between level 1, the least indigenized, and level 3, with limited progress towards the transformative integration. What does this mean for us? It means if we don't change this, then we are going to have evaluations that may lack the cultural legitimacy and will reinforce the old patterns that have existed across decades. The findings may not also resonate with the communities, and policy uptake may be limited. And so, is evaluation an accomplice or a supporter for development? We need to interrogate this. To move forward in strengthening evaluator education in Africa, we need a coordinated action. And we need this across curriculum, we need this across institutions, professional bodies, and knowledge systems. We need our universities to redesign their curriculum to reflect the African context. We need them to integrate both the global and local knowledge systems, as we saw in the adaptation and hybridization stage. But we need to move beyond that. We need to go a step further. We also need to expand pathways for doctoral training, because our classrooms, the people are not there. When we bring people from the industry to teach as part-time, when their first priority job calls, they are not showing up in the classroom. We need qualified people to teach. AfrEA has done well in promoting Made in Africa evaluation, but we need more support in curriculum development and supporting the professional identity. And AfrEA is strongly positioned, in my perspective, to do that. For our development partners and donors, we need their hand to support knowledge production within the continent and moving beyond external models to local African-led training systems. So, where do we go from here? I conclude with this, that Africa does not lack evaluators. What it lacks is a coherent system for developing evaluators who are grounded in its realities and equipped to shape its future. And so the future of evaluation in Africa will not be determined by how many evaluators we train, but how well we align their training with the realities they are meant to serve. I will end here, and I look forward to your reflections, questions, and contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Keney, for that wonderful presentation. You've gone slightly above the time allocated for you, but it was a very important session, so we had to give you that. I just want to make a few quick comments about your presentation and your study. Some of the main highlights that I've taken note of. One, that the study mapped 110 university-based evaluator education programs across 18 African countries. And you do mention that this is a significant expansion when you compare those two maps on the previously most comprehensive catalog of 32 programs across 10 countries. So this reveals major gaps, and underrepresentation in existing global directories. And you showed us that when you are sharing the map of your findings, the map of Africa and your findings. Then the programs are disproportionately concentrated in East and Southern Africa, predominantly in public universities and also in the capital cities, with Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, South Africa, and Tanzania accounting for the majority. While in North Africa, we had Morocco and Egypt, and then Central Africa, we had the DRC. Generally, Central Africa remains severely underrepresented. Then most programs are offered at the master's degree level, and interestingly, these are embedded within adjacent disciplines, and you gave examples of the disciplines where M&E is embedded, like in education, public health, and development studies. And then you also mentioned that the curricula emphasizes more of theoretical and methodological foundations, but lacks sufficient practical training opportunities for students. And you also posed that question towards the end, how we need to align our training to position the evaluators for what they are supposed to be doing in the field. Then, despite widespread acknowledgement of its importance, and you mentioned this when you're giving Dr. Chelisa, Professor Chelisa, and that continuum of from least developed to, from least indigenized to fully indigenized evaluation systems. The Made in Africa evaluation framework has not been meaningfully integrated into most curricula. And this means that our frameworks continue to rely heavily on Western epistemologies, donor-driven frameworks, and English language teaching material. And lastly, in terms of technology adoption, you mentioned that there's the inclusion of AI, hybrid, and online learning, and this remains somehow constrained by weak infrastructure, faculty shortages, large class sizes, digital literacy challenges, and some ethical concerns. So while there's limited integration of emerging methodologies, this restricts innovation and responsiveness to the continent's growing demand for evaluation expertise. So those are some of the main highlights of your presentation and your study. I want to take the privilege of being the moderator to just to ask one or two questions. And then I've also seen some 2 or 3 questions on the chat box. The host, the system host, will give them a chance to ask those questions verbally. But before that, I just want to ask you a question on this element of urgency, structure, and systematic change. So your study demonstrates that curriculum reform towards African-rooted methodologies is currently being driven organically by individual faculty champions, rather than by formal institutions or policy directives. This is something that we call a bottom-up rather than a top-down process, right? I don't know whether these ones were part of the people you interviewed, but maybe or maybe not. We have examples of Professor Bagele Chilisa from the University of Botswana. That is from the Southern Africa region. We have Professor Almas Mazigo from the University of Dar es Salaam, that's Eastern Africa. We have Professor Wanjiru Nderitu of the African Nazarene University, that's in Eastern Africa, and Professor Mjiba Frehiwot, our chief editor-in-chief of the Africa Evaluation Journal, based at the Institute of African Studies of the University of Ghana at Legon, Western Africa region. So my question to you is, theoretically, how sustainable and scalable is this individual-driven model of change, given the structural constraints that you already identified, including faculty shortages, donor dependencies, and weak accreditation frameworks? And what theoretical model would you propose to better explain and guide systematic transformation of evaluator education in Africa beyond what Confrey and Strachel framework that guided your study, beyond what that framework currently offers? And then my second theoretical question to you would be on the epistemological tension and the issue of decolonization. So your findings reveal a paradox where African evaluator education programs openly advocate for decolonization and the integration of made in Africa evaluation principles. Yet, simultaneously, they align their curriculum with donor frameworks and Western epistemologies, what you have described in your study as a moderate approach to decolonization. So I want to ask this. Theoretically, how do you reconcile this tension within this framework that you've used, the Confrey and Strachel framework of program theory framework, which was itself developed from the global North context? And how do you consider this framework sufficiently equipped to capture the depth of epistemic injustice, the concept that Professor Bagele Chilisa and Adonna Martens, I think, yes, they talk about the epistemic injustice that your findings try to expose in African evaluator education systems. And do you find it sufficient that you use this Western theoretical framework to analyze evaluator education in the African context? Over to you, Dr. Keney.
All right, thank you. I will start with the second question. So when I was deciding on the theoretical framework to guide a study, my interest then was a framework that will help me to understand how the programs are developed, what factors come to play, and how does that influence the outcomes that we are seeing. Because there is literature to support that our evaluations are not aligning with the expectations of the field. So I found this framework, which was used in an educational setting, and I believed it was relevant for my study at the time. So that is why I used it. And when you look at the framework, let me bring it into the slide. It shows you not only the factors that influence how the programs are developed, but the multiple factors. And so here we see the systemic factors that we talked about, how they come together, the implementation factors. So these are the resources, the processes, the contextual issues, the personnel, unanticipated influences, how all these factors influence the products that we are training. And so at the time of deciding, I wanted something that will help me to see this picture. And that framework was relevant for my study at the time. When I see another one that will be very relevant, I will jump onto it and see how best it will fit the narrative that I wanted to create. All right. Now, to the second question, what theoretical framework beyond what I used can better support evaluator education in Africa? There are multiple ways that we can look at this. We can think of culturally responsive evaluation. We can think of decolonial frameworks. We can even look at the Made in Africa evaluation. However, to what extent is this conversation happening? And my view is that the conversation needs to move beyond the boardrooms. We need to move the conversation beyond the conference rooms, because largely that is where the conversation has been happening. And even though a lot of this conversation has been led by people who teach evaluation, we do not yet see this happening in the classroom. And I know curriculum development and curriculum review doesn't happen in a minute. It takes a long time, right? And so now, which programs are due for revision? And during my interview, I observed from programs who are due for revision, who have seen the need to integrate the Made in Africa evaluation, who are now making more conscious effort to integrate that. And like you rightly said, Tanzania and Kenya are two of the only places where Made in Africa evaluation was explicitly mentioned in their curriculum. And Professor Bagale's University of Botswana was one of them. And that is the only place from the study where they use their materials that they publish to teach. So the people who are actively teaching Made in Africa evaluation are people who are writing and talking about it. Every other person may mention it, but it is not showing in the curriculum. And my point is this: let us move beyond the talking stage to actual integration. If you did not publish, you may not publish the material, but if it is published by another person and it is good enough, which are really good, we use them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Keney, for that. I can see a question from the chat box from Alfred Komen. They asked two questions. I will answer the second question and I'll leave you for you the first question. His second question is, can AfrEA explore on possible ways of having an evaluators association and allow for members subscription? Thank you. I just want to mention to Alfred that AfrEA in itself is an evaluators association, and AfrEA has got two, not two, but different types of membership. We have individual membership, and also we have VOPE membership, apart from other institutional members and corporate membership. So for individual members, you can pay directly your membership fee. Information is available in the AfrEA website, and you become an individual member. Alternatively, if you belong to your national VOPE in your country, once you pay your membership fee to that VOPE, and that VOPE pays membership fee to AfrEA, you automatically belong now to two VOPEs, your national VOPE and AfrEA. So that's short. Your first question is, I don't know whether you can see it, Dr. Keney. Is there a need for a centralized knowledge base that evaluators can access in real time? If yes, how can this be integrated in our institutions of higher learning?
Right.
And as you respond to that question, Dr. Keney, there's
Yes.
also another one from
Africa.
Kennedy Oulu. Kennedy Oulu is asking, Dr. Keney, why did you choose published literature and not inclusive of gray literature when evaluation education has a colonial lens? Respond to those two, then we can go to the next. Thank you.
Very well. So to Kennedy's question, when you're conducting the study, there are multiple resources that I can get data from, and I narrowed down on the resources that gave me the best results. So the published literature and the websites were the primary resources that gave me the data that I needed to do the work. Did I not consult them? I did, but not so much the information that I needed at the time to complete my work. Remember, at the time of the study, the goal is to finish. And so I narrowed down on what will help me to get across the finishing line. Now, to the second question, yes, there is the African Evaluation Database. This is a collection of more than 5,000 resources. It includes, let me see, 1,998 articles, 4,159 reports, and 1,549 theses. That it was developed by Claire Africa. So you can use this resource, and in any way that will help you. I have referred colleagues in the past to these resources for their own use. So you can consult it. My goal is to make my database publicly available. I have a manuscript in preparation right now that I'll be submitting very soon.
Yes.
And that has a collection of all the programs and where they are located that you can use. Feel free to use it when it's out. Currently, my database is not publicly available. I'm working on that. Thank you. Dr. Ponge, can you point me to the other questions, please? Okay, why did you?
Sorry. I'm talking while muted. Yes, the other question from comment, then there was the one from Kennedy. Yes, after Kennedy, I don't know whether Eunice is there so that she can ask her question. Eunice Mutepfa. Eunice, and then there's also a comment from Dr. Candice. Then we get to the other questions. Maybe if you can allow Eunice Mutepfa to ask her question, and then Dr. Candice Mokel to give her comment, and then we get to the other two questions.
Right.
Thank you.
To Eunice's question, I have not explored extensively mentorship models on the continent. What I have observed is the fact that there are limited mentorship opportunities, even though various initiatives have been implemented. For instance, I know Samia has a young and emerging evaluator mentorship program that they support their young early career members. Eval Youth has been very active in promoting mentorship. So the opportunities are there, but I have not yet explored in very detail how much effective these have been. All right, somebody is asking for, Oluwasegun is asking for support. Emerging evaluators like myself should be supported to gain experience and knowledge through exposure in form of workshop conference. So this is what I would say. The only way you'll be supported is to put yourself out there. Join the evaluation association in your country. Join evaluation groups outside of your country. Internationally, Eval Youth is there. IOC is there. Join them, attend the webinars, make yourself known, make a contribution. You will not be paid, but the result will come later. Now I call it seed sowing. You need to sow the seed. Nobody is going to hold your hand and support you. You have to put yourself out there first. Show value, and the support will come. That is what I'll say based on my own experience. There is one in French, and I am limited in that, so I will.
Maybe we can ask Abain Saj to ask that question, and then the interpreters can give us an interpretation. Thank you.
Right.
Abain.
All right, while we wait for...
If Abain Saj is not there, can we get a comment from Dr. Candice? Then we come back to the other two questions. Dr. Candice.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. And thank you very much for this very, very important topic and the study, Dr. Keney. What I was saying in the comment in the chat is that we definitely need more coherence in evaluation education, and it's not particularly only an African problem, it is globally. But of course, we are concerned with what's happening on the continent. There are competency frameworks, and in fact, a colleague of ours, Dr. Rhoda Goromucheche, actually did a PhD comparing various competency frameworks. And I think that is a very, very good starting point for us to look at what can we do to improve the coherence of evaluation education programs. So that's one thing I wanted to also just raise, to say that there are actually competency frameworks, but it's just very, very incoherent and very institution specific. I mean, there are many commonalities and I think they do overlap, but We don't have one that is sort of agreed upon for the sector or for the field. But the other important comment and observation I've made over the years is that we don't have a very clear professional development pathway for all of us, either new entrants or those of us who are more experienced, because we all are involved in a lifelong learning journey. And it's very difficult, but especially if you're a young or an emerging evaluator or new to the field, to know where the starting point is. What's the best pathway? Should I do a short course? Should I go to a university? Is it better to be on an African university? Is it better to go to an international university? So we haven't made that journey very clear. And we also need to do better about positioning the short course programs in such a way that it helps professionals to say, okay, if I do these short course programs, it gives me a stepping stone into more formal academic programs. So that is a completely broken chain. So you can do a short course program somewhere, but it's got no relevance or connection to any kind of formal program. So I do think that those of us who are working in evaluation education, whether in universities or short course programs. So for me, for example, some of you or my colleagues will know that I'm now at IPDET. We are also trying to now make that chain more clear to say, okay, if you do IPDET programs or anything, clear short course programs at the University of Stellenbosch, at Wits University, at the GIMPA in Ghana, at the various universities in Uganda, Zambia, etc., etc. We should know that, okay, if I do these short course programs, it gives me a stepping stone into the next professional development pathway. And then just the last point, somebody asked a very important question there saying that how do we know that this training actually works? That actually if I send my staff to these programs, that they're going to be competent and experienced enough. I do think we don't pay enough attention to coaching and mentoring, because you can do the studying and the theoretical work, but you do need strong mentorship and on-the-job training. And I think we sometimes leave people in the deep end. They get the degree or they get the certificate, and then we say, okay, now you're an evaluator. But we don't give them the proper support and mentorship to become experts. And I think we need to do better to kind of make that connection as well in our programs. Thank you very much, colleagues. Sorry for taking too much time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Candice. I think maybe Dr. Candice, you should have also shared with them that the IPDET applications will be coming up soon. So maybe you can put on the chat box the link to IPDET so that when the applications are open, they can do the necessary. Then there's a question I wanted to ask you, Dr. Keney, about how your study can be used to feed into the database of the Global Directory of Academic Programs in Evaluation. And I'm seeing an offer from Lauren. Lauren is saying that if you send us a copy of your database, we can load it to the African Evaluation Database for you so people can easily access it. And my email contact is on the landing page. So you can go to the African Evaluation Database and you can see how your findings can be fed into the global directory. I can see one of the persons I did mention as contributing at individual level to the Made in Africa evaluation, Dr. Wanjiru Nderitu. Can you please just give us an insight of how this is happening and how we can sustain this, how we can move beyond the individual to the institutionalization? Over to you, Dr. Wanjiru. Can you unmute Dr. Wanjiru, please? The operator, can you unmute Dr. Wanjiru?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I can see I'm unmuted, but I can't. Okay. Dr. Ponge, please ask me the question again. I had put a question on the chat. I thought it's the one that I was supposed to answer, but you just want me to say what we are doing currently on Made in Africa evaluation? approaches?
I did mention, Dr. Keney mentioned that more of the work is done from an individual perspective, individual
Yes.
champions. And
Yes.
the Made in Africa has not been institutionalized much. And I did mention some of the key actors who are doing this at the individual level.
Yes.
Professor Bagele Chilisa, I mentioned you, I mentioned Dr. Mazigo, and also Professor Frehiwot from the University of Ghana. So from you as an individual practitioner who is advocating for and promoting Made in Africa evaluation, how do you want this to be sustained so that when Professor Wanjiru leaves African Nazarene University, the Made in Africa approach does not stop with her or does not go with her? Thank you. And I just seek your indulgence, good people. We've passed the time. We were supposed to stop at 15 hours Kenya time, but because this thing is so sweet, you can just allow us to maybe continue with just a few more minutes so that we can have all these questions responded to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ponge, and thank you so much, Dr. Keney. That was very good. I will be very brief. The only thing which I had already put in the chat is that we need to come up with a way of making sure that what we are teaching and what we are aspiring, maybe moving towards to indigenizing Made in Africa evaluations and making it practical, is done through the accreditation bodies and also parliaments and also Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Education, because as much as we are teaching, if it's not embraced at the higher level where we have the authorities, then we may not move too far. Right now, nobody review curriculums after every 5 years. We are at the time now we are reviewing our curriculum and intending to review and add the aspect of Made in Africa evaluation and indigenous knowledge systems and everything. And that is what we teach right now, but it's still not included in the curriculum. Now we're going to include it. Once we send it to the accreditation body, who is going to be there to accredit it? Are they going to review it? Are they going to accept it? So that is a question I'd asked. What are we doing to make sure that we are also cushioning ourselves as we bring in this new and very important information and our own epistemologies, our relational epistemologies as our ways of knowing as African people of African descent, and in understanding evaluation, in involving everybody, involving the communities towards addressing the power asymmetries and even the making sure that we are well represented. So we need to champion, first of all, we do not have an act of parliament that cushions us. And that is what we need to be championing. We have very poorly implemented M&E policies within our governments. So I think we need to also deal with the source and try to see how else can we champion and make sure that we come together through AfrEA, academia, and all the ecosystems that Dr. Ken has alluded to make sure that we are now having a bigger umbrella that is supporting that which we are moving to. Without that, it becomes very difficult for us even as we teach, because we don't know whether it's going to be applicable anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Wanjiru. I'm seeing a question from Bashir Al-Shria. Bashir is asking this, and I hope I'll ask the last two questions to Dr. Keney based on this. How can we expect foreign donors to respect or accept a purely African evaluation methodology for evaluating development programs and projects that they have funded? That's Bashir from Libya. And then the other question for you is, I think it's a statement. Congratulations on your presentation. Your research shows that in Central Africa, it is primarily in the DRC that evaluation training programs are well established. I did not see any training programs from Cameroon included in your mapping. We know, for example, that the Pan-African Institute for Development, IPD, in Douala, trains project evaluators. There are also public and private institutions offering courses in evaluation. This is the case at the University of Maroa in the far northern region of Cameroon. So that's just a statement. Maybe you can think about that. Or another comment is from Sunday Obazi that the evaluation body's fee for joining is very high for young people that are interested in evaluation. I think I've been a champion of youth in evaluation. I tried as much as possible to see that we could reduce the charges for the young and emerging evaluators. Given that I've just walked out of the office, I think this will be the first thing that I'll tell the incoming vice president to work with the board on this so that we have a reduction in the fee for young and emerging evaluators. And Dr. Wanjiru, you asked what is AfrEA doing to actively involve government within Africa? I'll refer you to the new initiative that AfrEA is currently implementing with the DEVAL of the government of Germany and the World Food Program, the INSE program. Maybe Kenya may not be one of the beneficiary countries, but it is something that has already been piloted in 6 countries, and AfrEA is scaling this beyond the INSE program to another new initiative we are coming up with called the CADASC program that is to be implemented with the African Capacity Building Foundation. So this one should be able to answer your question. So Dr. Keney,
Yes.
3 minutes response to that, and then we close.
Right. I wanted to respond to a few questions. So thank you first, Dr. Candice. I will be reaching out to explore how you can integrate my database into what is currently there. And I've also taken note of Dr. Wilshire. Pardon me if I did miss your name. Concerning the African Evaluation Database. So now, 3 quick thoughts. Concerning Dr. Inderitu's question, I did not interview people in the commissioners of education across our countries to look at the accreditation mechanisms that are currently available. At the time, again, my focus was on what is out there and where are they located. So this will be an opportunity for a future study, which is on my cards. Now, the other thing also is that, yes, it is true. The absence of competency frameworks has implications on the quality of programs that are being taught. And in my current work, I establish alignment between the learning outcomes and the institutional priorities. And some programs, like in the health sciences, they have external accreditor competency frameworks that needs to be met. And so if you do not align what is taught in the classroom with the competencies, then you are going to produce students who are miles apart from what the field expects. And so we need the competency framework. If we are not subscribing to international frameworks, the African evaluation guidelines are there, the African evaluation principles are there that we can start from. And I know one person in South Africa developed a competency framework for SAMIA that we can use. I know Uganda also have their own evaluation competency. So there are pockets of frameworks that are there that we can borrow from. It is not wrong to borrow ideas from another place. You take them, you look at what it means for you and your context, and then you adapt them. Now, how does training actually work? Right, so that is the other part of my study, which I did not do at the time I was doing the study. When you look at the framework that I used, it has 4 main components, and the last component has to do with the training of evaluators, the outcome, what we are getting. That I didn't do at the time of the study, and that is also something that I will pursue in the future. So yes, How training works, I have no idea at this moment, but it is definitely something that we need to explore. Another person can take this up as a study, or I can do it myself, right, when the opportunity is there. So this was the framework that I used. So I looked at the components, I looked at the implementation factors at the institutional level, factors beyond the institution right here in the middle, and the outcomes. So this was the question, the point that our colleague asked, and which Dr. Merkel also highlighted. Training outcomes. Are we producing the students that we said we are going to produce? Yes or no? That has not been explored yet. We can do this through a tracer study or a longitudinal study. The opportunity is still there for grab. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Keney. I'm seeing some 3 questions on the chat, on the Q&A. Initially, I was concentrating on the questions which were on the chat. I've just seen some 3. I asked Abain to read for us. He was not there. Then there's the one from Ernest Alang. Just check your Q&A,
Yes.
Keney. But before you do that, I wanted to respond to Eric Balang. Eric says, can we consider AU and ECOWAS to aid our recognition in all African countries? Eric Balang from Ghana. My response to you is that, one, we have the regional representatives at AfrEA. We have the Eastern Africa regional representative, Western, Southern, Northern, and Central. These regional representatives are free and mandated to work with the regional bodies. So like we are talking of ECOWAS, I think the Western Africa region should be able, regional representatives should be able to work alongside ECOWAS to realize this. And AfrEA at the continental level, I just wish to share with you that during our celebration of 25 years of AfrEA existence in Addis Ababa, we signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with the African Union, and that was launchpad on how AfrEA can help get into the member states of the African Union, especially in trying to help the member states realizing the Agenda 2063. Dr. Keney, 2 minutes for this.
Right. The answer to Ernest's question is no. I have not engaged policymakers yet based on my findings. That is something that will happen later. And this presentation is an opportunity to connect with such people if they are here for us to see what we can do differently to strengthen evaluator education on the continent. To the second one, I will need help with the Q&A in French. Let me look at the second one. All right, the second one is not a question, it's a comment. It says, just some contribution. From a cost efficiency perspective, a key in our continent context for now and future, this also calls for a more strategic approach to capacity development. The expansion of highly specialized training pathways such as master's and PhD programs in evaluation should be carefully aligned with actual market demand, which may not always require a large pool of advanced experts. Instead, greater emphasis could be placed on developing practical competencies in complementary and transferable areas such as statistics, qualitative analysis, data collection, and artificial intelligence. These skill sets are not only essential for strengthening evaluation practice, but are also applicable across multiple sectors, thereby enhancing both flexibility and sustainability. Right, and you captured it succinctly. When I analyzed the curriculum, when I did the curriculum mapping, what I found was that a lot of the programs were teaching hard statistics, quantitative courses with very little qualitative and mixed methods. So there is an opportunity in there also for us to reconsider what we are teaching and how we are teaching and preparing students for the field.
Thanks, Dr. Keney. Just the last one from Latifa. When will African public institutions take ownership of evaluation commissioning on their own terms? I believe if they do this, the rest of the process will follow easily. Just the last, and then we can close.
Right.
And then maybe all the questions that you put on the chat box, AfrEA will download these and give them to Dr. Keney, who will respond to them, and then we will be able to share this through the AfrEA listserv. So don't get worried if your question has not been answered. Over to you, Dr. Keney.
Thank you, Dr. Ponge. So the last one, Peter Nyambo, has an interesting question. Do you genuinely think policymakers there will be any meaningful headway when you engage policymakers? My response is, I have no idea. We will figure it out when we get there. And this is a call to all of us that this is our land and we need all hands to get this moving. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Keney. From Standiwe, are we able to get the recording? Yes, we will share the recording to all those who registered and participated. Freya has all your email addresses, so you will get that. So I just want to make a final remark, then I give Dr. Keney 2 minutes for the final, and then, or I can start with Dr. Keney, just 2 minutes to summarize everything about your whole experience with this presentation. Exactly 2 minutes.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ponge. All I want to say is a big thank you to AfrEA, a big thank you to Dr. Wadrago and the AfrEA leadership, Dr. Ponge, and the participants who helped me to bring this work to light, including my professors who supervised this work. I want to thank you all. This work is for you, and I'm doing my best to make this publicly available so that it will benefit our continent and the global evaluation community at large. And so I look forward to continuing this conversation. You can reach out to me and we will keep the conversation going. One ask that I need from you is that new programs are coming up. I couldn't capture every program as yet. And so if you are aware of any evaluation program that is out there, I am dropping a link in the form. Kindly fill the form to share this information with me. I will add it and then it will be made publicly available. Now, here is the thing. After the study, I went back to look at what I missed and I identified 20 more programs. That was way back in February 2026 when I did that work. So there are more out there that were not captured. If you know of any program out there, please complete this form and I will do my best to add it to what I currently have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much. I can see from the interpreter, please, could you allow Francophones to ask their questions directly so that we can interpret them into English? We did ask that. We've been asking them to ask their questions directly, but they've not been responding. I don't know. Can we get 1 or 2 questions, especially the one on the Q&A, Abain Saj? We've asked Abain Saj severally to ask the question, but it's not. Can we get Abain Saj to ask that question? If Abain is not there, I think I just want to finish by saying that Dr. Keney's work is a clarion call to all of us. It is a reminder that we are serious about building generation of evaluators who are globally competitive, yet culturally grounded, technically rigorous, yet community responsive. We must invest strategically and urgently in the institutions, faculty, curricula, and partnerships that make such formations possible. So on behalf of all the participants, I wish to extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Keney for sharing this important and timely research with us, and to all of you who engaged so generously with your questions, reflections, and insights toward this session. The conversation does not end here. Indeed, it must continue in our classrooms, in our evaluation associations, in our policy chambers and discussions, and also in our funding decisions. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing the continued impact of this work across the African evaluation ecosystem. Now, allow me to hand over to our programs manager at AfrEA, Dr. Emmanuel Badu, for the closing remarks, and also to make any announcements if at all the date and day for the next webinar has been set. Over to you, Emmanuel. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ponge. Thank you for moderating this wonderful session. Thank you to Dr. Keney for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure we've all been very enlightened and know our next steps and how to prevail in our quest to become wonderful evaluators. Yes, so by way of announcement, we would want to make aware that our next webinar will be in May, and this is a special one because it's going to be an AfrEA years. All the years are putting themselves together to come up with a wonderful webinar such as this, which would involve wonderful facilitators and moderators who are going to also push this vehicle for the proper way for which we would have made in Africa evaluation for all. So let's look out for the announcements come May next month, and then let's do well to register. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you again next month. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Someone is asking about years. What years are? Years are the young and emerging evaluators. So thanks, everyone.